Kia ora world, how are we today? I'm just sharing the live to a couple of places. Copy. If you're joining us, feel welcome to say kia ora, morena. I'd love to know that you were here with me. I am just sharing the live. We're going to talk all into abandonment wounds today, which is huge. If you're joining us today, say kia ora, say morena, say hello. Let me know if you have experienced any sort of abandonment or any sort of abandonment wounds or experiences. If you can relate to this and it lands with you. If it triggers you and makes you uncomfortable as well, let us know. It makes me uncomfortable. Makes me really triggered. I'm really uncomfortable, and that's why I'm here to speak to you guys about it today. So let me just check that it's shared correctly, and then my full devoted attention will be with you. Let's just make sure it's shared correctly. If you're new to this space, my name is Madeline Lee. I am from Ride Your Stigma, founder and creator. Yes, it is all shared there. Greatly, awesome. So now I can be focused. So abandonment wounds, guys. I've been battling them big over the weekend, really big, and did a wound healing process yesterday from my intuitive healer certification, which was really huge. So first of all, I want to talk about like what is an abandonment wound? Like how do we know that we really have one? Because I don't know, I never knew, and I've had it for a long time, actually probably my whole life. Don't even know where it started yet. I've just started another a 14-day stint of inner child meditation that I have set myself. I am on day 4 today, of doing an inner child meditation for 14 days, because I still don't know the core of when my abandonment wound or wounds kind of started, or the core of it, where it really started to turn, which I feel like is really common going back to our childhood and trying to understand and see where it stemmed from and where the abandonment started, where it started to build from. Because I used to think like I had quite a sheltered, loving childhood and upbringing and things like that. So how did I get an abandonment wound? My parents didn't just drop me off on the side of the road and abandon me, because I was quite literal in my mind when I was thinking, until you really start to actually just look at things like emotional abandonment. And then you're like, oh, okay. So I've written down a heap of notes here that I just kind of want to share with you guys, and at the end I'm going to go through a few tips and tools and ways to start working on and tuning in to discovering where your abandonment wound has come from, and how you can start working on bringing awareness into your heart about your abandonment wound, how it got there, why you feel abandoned, and how you can kind of strengthen safety and trust in yourself, in your relationship with yourself, and your relationships externally from you as well. So I'm going to drop into a few tips and tools that I use to strengthen and heal abandonment wounds in myself and in my clients as well. So if you have any questions along the way, or any thoughts or anything that you want to share, feel free to drop it in the comments as well. Before I kind of dive into it, I just want to, I suppose, bring to our attention that when I'm sharing around abandonment wounds, there is no judgment, there is no blame. So we talk about abandonment wounds, and they're often created from our parenting, our upbringing, our relationships, our experiences. And quite often people can get triggered and think that it is about them, or especially parents, and then we've got children and the layers that go down in abandonment wounds. Like, we've all got parents. We have parents of some way or form, whether we're in contact with them or not, or whether they're passed, or whether we were adopted, etc. We all had birth parents to get here on earth. And often it's almost like people assume that it means that it's a blame thing, that it's someone caused this. And I want to say it's just a life exposure human experience, and it's not a judgment thing, it's not a blame thing. It's getting to the unpacking of the core of discovering where the abandonment wound started, so that you can understand where it started, how and why you came to these insecurities, anxiety, abandonment, fear, upset, the opposite of security in relationships, the upset, the wound that has all these emotions that kind of ripple off it, and then we become this ball of upset through our abandonment wounds. So I want to say it's not, everything that I share today is not a judgment or a blame, but more a fact of human experience through our childhood, our upbringings, our generations, just our life exposure, which we're always going to have life exposure. That's living life, and we all have experiences, and no one's life is fully 100% positive or negative. There's an array of colors, and we have dark and light, and we have challenging, and we have the more serving things that ease and flow as well. Okay, so I want to start with the wound. We get triggered and go back to a space, place, emotion where it all started. So a wound, an abandonment wound, for me, and how I understand it, is when a certain something plays out in our life, in our relationships. So abandonment wounds are generally in relationships, or romantic relationships, or friendships, or partnerships of any way or form. It could even be with a mentor, it could be with career, it could be career based, so it could be with your workmates even, or study buddies even. So it can be all sorts of any relationships in your life. So an abandonment wound for me is when we get triggered by something playing out in a relationship that triggers us, and then we go back and flip back into a space or place or emotion where it all started, and we almost like we're reliving those experiences from that wound, from childhood, or like our inner child, whatever we experienced when it started. And that's why I'm talking about finding the core and unpacking where it really started, where you first started experiencing and feeling that emotion of abandonment, and all the layers of emotion within the abandonment, so that I'm not good enough. If I was good enough, I wouldn't be left here. There was, what else did I write down? There was not feeling good enough. Did I do something wrong? I'm not good enough. And then slipping into reactiveness. And just those emotions of like sadness and like rejection, that like no one, feeling that cliche. I used to say this all the time in my old versions of myself, actually, that no one ever cares about me, and no one ever loves me. I used to say that a lot, that no one ever wants to spend time with me. Abandonment wound. So really, really big. So understanding whether you have an abandonment wound can take a while to even come to the conclusion or the understanding or the consciousness that we even have an abandonment wound. So I've obviously and clearly had this abandonment wound pretty much my whole life since I was a child at some age, which I have yet to discover. That's why I've set a new intention again to do a 14-day of inner child meditation and work, and I'm on day 4 right now, because but still often in my soul and in myself and my everyday life, abandonment is coming up over and over, and it's telling me to learn about it and dig deeper into the wound to find out where it started and start to unpack and heal that. And that's why I've come on to talk about it today, because it just keeps hitting me. And there was something else, relationship sabotage and reactiveness. So I want to say, like, unhealed abandonment wounds can flip us into reactivity. I don't know if that's the right word, but reactiveness, and like lashing out. It's almost like a defense kind of protection reactiveness that I get into because of the feelings of I'm not good enough, I'm doing something wrong, why am I not fulfilling this person, I'm no good, etc. And I start flipping into the space where I feel rejected and I'm spinning around in circles, and then I feel abandoned, and then I feel sad, and then it dips back into my self-worth, and then I'm like, if I was worth it, people would spend time with me, they wouldn't abandon me, they wouldn't reject me, they wouldn't exclude me, they wouldn't not prioritize me, etc, etc, etc. And then we go down in this spiral, and the reactiveness and the defense protective method that we sometimes use can end up becoming relationship sabotage and becoming, I suppose, I don't know if I want to use the word toxic, but like digging the hole or the wound almost deeper, because we also have deeper fears of, like, so we have fear of rejection. We have fear of rejection comes from or connected to our abandonment wound. So fear of rejection. So we would rather just do nothing, or sometimes we'll get in shock and we'll not do anything because we're afraid of rejection or not being enough. We make it about us, even when sometimes externally it's not about us. We also can have fear of intimacy or being cared for, or fear of letting it in, because we have fear of the past wound, again, the trigger of going back to that space, place, or emotion that we've experienced in our childhood somewhere, whether it's one wound or multiple wounds that layer on top of each other around abandonment. So we have a fear of intimacy because we have a fear of allowing that intimacy and care to come into us, because if we allow that to come in, that means that it can also be taken away, that it can also abandon us again. And we know how painful and how painful and those more negative, hurtful emotions can feel when we in that abandonment wound, and then it repeats and it happens again and again and again and again. So we can have fear of rejection, we can have fear of intimacy and fear of being cared of, and it's like a wall of protection is the only way that the main way that's clear for me to understand, because I've learned that within myself, that when I'm feeling abandoned, I will push the people or persons away, like, no, and then I get really stubborn and I'll come into my like fierce independent woman, and I'm like, nah, I'm fine, I can fucking do it all by myself. I can do it all by myself, but that's still me being in my triggered abandonment wound, because if I could come into presence, and I could be like, okay, this is setting me on edge. I'm scared of rejection. I'm fearful of abandonment. I'm feeling out of it. I'm feeling out of my comfort zone. I'm not feeling safe. But do I need to protect myself like this from it? Can I own it and come into my honesty and be like, hey, I'm feeling really freaking uncomfortable right now, and I'm finding it really hard to allow intimacy to come into me, allow myself to be cared for, because I'm afraid of my abandonment wounds when we're triggered, and then we go back to the space or place or emotion where this abandonment wound first started, back in our childhood or back in our past, wherever we've been abandoned before. And when I say abandoned back in our childhood, most of the time, or quite often, it's not that someone's intentionally abandoned us. People don't walk around and go, I'm going to abandon you. But sometimes when we have not yet learned how to give to all of ourselves, self-care for ourselves, especially like in parenthood and stuff like that, when we're struggling to juggle all the things in life, looking after ourselves, the busy things, the jobs, the monies, the cleanings, all the things, then sometimes there can be like a depletion and there's nothing left of us, and the only thing we know is to do what we do. And then all of a sudden our little ones, whether maybe we have a 4-year-old and the 4-year-old is wanting our attention and got all the energy in the world, and we're like, fuck, I'm fucking exhausted, I just need you to shush for a minute. I just need to build my cup up, and so maybe we're there physically and we've put food on the table and they're warm and they're watching a movie or they're playing with their toys, but really that child wants our 24/7 attention, and we just don't have the emotional capacity at that time, so we shut off a little bit, let them play, they're warm, they're showered, they're clean, they're looked after, but emotionally we've detached to come into ourselves to fill our own cup. And even something as gentle as that, like that child is still looked after, but in a sense that child can perceive that they're abandoned, like the feelings of abandonment, because the emotional connection there with parent and child is not there right then, because the parent is trying to feel their own emotions, and especially if they have unhealed abandonment wounds themselves, the parents. And I think this is why it's so crucial and why I'm so passionate about the work that I do and the work that we can do internally on our own abandonment wounds and our own healing. If we can heal ourselves, we heal our children and the next generation and the next generation. So I'm going to come back again because I'm waffling off a little bit, but abandonment wounds. So if we come back, so we've talked a little bit about fear of rejection, fear of intimacy and being cared for, that we find our abandonment wounds kind of bleed through and show through into our relationships and our friendships. It's when we get triggered and we go back to a space, place or emotion where it all started. So suddenly we're triggered because someone tells us, this is a beautiful example from my own personal experiences, when someone doesn't turn up or tells me they're going to come and books. It can be business, it can be personal, it can be even meeting up for a walk or a coffee with a friend, and they forget to message me and cancel. I flip and trigger straight back into my abandonment wound, and it really hits me hard, and I get really reactive, like I get angry or I get stroppy. Even so, I'm selling a blender. I'm cleaning out and selling things out. I was selling a blender, a kitchen blender yesterday, and a girl said that she was going to come at 1 o'clock. Got to 2:30, and so I texted her and I was like, hey, are you coming to pick it up? I've been waiting for you. And then she goes, oh no, sorry, we're not going to purchase it. So come on, I'm selling a blender. But I got triggered and I actually replied, I was like, well, thanks F-load for letting me know. And I got really triggered and angry and reactive, and that's not me. That's not me. And I think this is what it is. Like when we snap into our abandonment wound, we act from places that aren't our true self because it's a wounded version of ourselves. And so that was a beautiful little example where yesterday I snapped and I was like, well, if you, it's been an hour and a half. You knew you weren't going to come and get it. It wasn't about that. It was that I felt abandoned again. Like even if you look at that, like I triggered and I got reactive, and it was like my protective wall went up like, fuck you. Fuck you, no. Because it triggered me back into the space of abandonment because she said she was going to be here. She said she was going to buy it and she didn't. So she didn't follow through with what she said. And then you might be going, well, yeah, Maddie, but things change, life changes. And I understand that. And I definitely, I suppose, speaking into that, it's like, yeah, but if she had decided, which she obviously did decide before she was not going to pick it up, if she could have, at 10 a.m. sent me a message and say, hey, I've actually found another blender that I like better. I'm not going to come and get it, just letting you know. I've healed my wounds enough. They'll be like, oh, okay, cool, thanks for letting me know. But the avoidance or the absence in the relationship, and you'll go, well, what relationship? Well, we have a relationship with everything in our life and everyone and every item and things around us. So I still had a relationship with that girl, even though I don't know who she is. And she still, in a sense, avoided. I know she did. She avoided. She was absent. She didn't communicate. And she wasn't honest until I messaged an hour and a half later to check because I'm sitting there waiting. So for me, like that's a beautiful example of like abandonment in your everyday life triggering you, and why it's so important that we do look at our abandonment wounds, we do look at our past childhood wounds and to heal them, because it affects how we live in our everyday life. It affects our anxiety, it affects our emotions, it affects our self-worth, it affects how we show up in our relationships. It is absolutely crucial to be able to have the holistic life that we dream of, to have happiness, fulfillment, to have peace, to live in calm rather than a stress factor all the time. So what else have we got? Safety, that's what else I haven't mentioned as well about abandonment wounds. So it often feels like when we're in an abandonment wound, it feels like there's no true safety anywhere. And for me, it's almost like I'm scrambling. Like when I'm in my abandonment wound and I'm looking around for safety, like I'm scrambling. Like I'm like, oh, well, where's the stability? Like, where's the safety? I feel unsafe. It's like my inner child is like coming out, and it's like, oh, but I'm looking everywhere and there's no security. There's no stability. Like, oh, like the unknown. When is everyone just going to drop me? And then there's no consistency. And so it comes back to inner child. It comes back to inner wound, like abandonment wound, that we're like, oh, so as a child, did I feel safe? Did I feel the consistency of care? Did I feel safety? Did I feel true safety and trust in my environment and my relationships? Or did I not? Like, did I not emotionally? Like, where is the sense of true safety and trust? And in a child, if you don't really know much about your inner child, it's like your inner child is the parts of you. I'm just thinking around abandonment and what we're talking about, true safety and trust. Would your inner child self, so like your 5-year-old self, your 7-year-old self, did he feel safety in their relationships and their surroundings? Or did he, she, they, whoever you want to, look around and go, there's no stability, there's no consistency, I don't know what's going to stay and what's going to go. And this can get really deep, if we look at like split parentship, or having only one parent, or being adopted, or having two parents there, but really they're not there because they've got so much stuff going on within themselves that's unhealed. So we had two parents here physically, but it was almost equivalent to that child of not having the two parents there. And of course, yes, for the physical care and hygiene and safety, but emotionally, again, there is such a depth to it. So yeah, safety, realizing that abandonment wound has an interconnection with safety and trust. So even as adults, so like I have a huge abandonment wound, or multiple, and I've been working on healing them for probably only the last 6 months properly. And I'm 28, and it's like I sit here this weekend, I've had some stuff come up. That's why I'm here talking about it. I've had some stuff come up around abandonment wounds and myself this weekend. That's why I wanted to come and talk about it and give some tips that I'll give at the end about how to start healing our abandonment wound. Because as a 28-year-old, of course I know that I'm safe, but I also don't emotionally feel safe, if that makes sense. It's such a complexity. It's so simple, but it's also so complex. If we look at it that in a child that's unhealed within us, and then I've sat here all weekend by myself feeling really, really abandoned, feeling really, really hurt, really, really in pain, really, really unsafe. And people go, well, Maddie, like, you're in your room, like, you're safe. Like, yeah, I'm physically safe, but my emotions, my inner child, my inner self, I'm living back in that triggered, or how did I go for it, in that place where we're triggered to go back to that space, place, or emotion where it all started. Back when I was a child somewhere, which I'm yet to know the points of where my wound started. That's why I'm starting to do more healing on it. This weekend I was living back in that space of my inner child. Where I just felt never enough. Where I didn't feel good enough. Where I just felt rejected. Where I just felt in the way. Where I felt excluded. Where I felt, and this doesn't always have to mean that it has or hasn't included people actually doing certain things to exclude me, etc. But this is how I felt. The experiences and relationships around me is how I felt, and how I feel when I trigger back into my abandonment wound. So not enoughness, not doing something right, or doing things wrong all the time, having fear of doing things wrong all the time, or not being good, cliche good. We talked a little bit about reactiveness and relationship sabotage. What else is there? Yeah, big man. Triggers are our path to healing, is what I want to say too. So the word trigger can trigger some people. I kind of, to be honest, my rebel in me kind of like saying the word trigger because I know it triggers. So I'm gonna go through a couple of, I suppose, tips that we can use to work on healing our abandonment wound. So I've written some tools down, but I've also written down, I suppose, some, what do you call them? I'm just going to read them because I'm not sure what to call them. So honesty, communication, presence, ownership and standing in it, and in your real truth. So the tools that I would use, so the tool number one, I'm going to say, is presence, honesty, and ownership, which these words I have just shared kind of like fit under it. So tool number one is presence, honesty, and ownership. So in those moments, when you're triggered and you're going to trigger back into that space, place, or emotion where it all started, and you're in the wound, when you're in your abandonment wound, for me, how I react when I'm in my abandonment wound is I attack. I attack and I become reactive. I do become a bit victim, but I stick up that protection wall. Like, it's automated. It's automated for me that when I'm in my abandonment wound and I'm triggered, I get reactive and I'm like, well, you blah, 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 and you don't care about me. Fuck you. That's where I come from. That's my abandonment wound. That's like my protection of like, and the same of the fear of intimacy and fear of rejection. So they are lying, sitting in the wings. When I'm in that abandonment wound, it's fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, fear of loss, fear of being abandoned, fear of intimacy or letting people care for me. And then I just pull in reactiveness while I'm in that wound. So I want to say when that wound comes up for you, so bringing awareness to it and observing yourself, and it takes consistency and time and conscious practice to grasp awareness of when you are in your abandonment wound. Okay? So you're not just going to wake up tomorrow and be like, I'm in my abandonment wound, and then it's fixed. It is like conscious, consistency in practicing and bringing awareness to it. So it's not a one-time fix. It's a long-term thing. Healing in general and healing your abandonment wounds. It's not read one book. I've got a recommendation of a book here, but it's not reading one book and then being healed of that abandonment wound. So I want to say when you can, if you are wanting to heal your abandonment wound and work on healing it, first of all is knowing when you are in your abandonment wound, and if you have an abandonment wound, and noticing when you are triggered and you are in your abandonment wound. So I know that I'm in my abandonment wound when I'm ready to fucking attack, when I am reactive in the moment, and I'm like, and then I'm defensive, I'm like, my independent woman, that I call it, strikes up, and she's like, no, I don't need you. I don't need any of you. I can do it all by myself. And my stubbornness comes out. And I'm like, no, get away. Or I start to get reactive and blame the other person and attack and tell them all the reasons why they are abandoning me. And I start blaming. So I know that I'm in my wound right then. So when you can narrow down, so practice and practice and practice, bringing that awareness to, oh, am I in my abandonment wound? How do I react? Not everyone may react like I do in their abandonment wound. They may go really closed off and quiet and avoidant and just walk away if you're in your abandonment wound, because your feeling of not feeling good enough may overpower you, and you just think, oh, I'm just quiet and I'll have no voice and I'll go away. So not everyone will react like I do, but this is my personal experience, which I think could help you to understand that. So you will have your own way of expressing and living through your abandonment wound. So bringing awareness and practicing and bringing consciousness and observing consistently over time when you notice, so noticing when you are in your abandonment wound and that trigger of going back to that space, place or emotion where that abandonment wound started or was built, then being present in the trigger and being honest with yourself is the tool. Ownership. So presence, honesty, ownership while you're in your abandonment wound. Which, yes, can be very confronting, can be very challenging. But the more we can be present, honest, and own what we are feeling in that moment, it can release something over time because we're bringing awareness to it. And we're going, oh, okay, I'm noticing right now, in this present moment, I am reactive because I am hurting and I am in my abandonment wound and I am not myself right now. I am in that wounded inner child. I'm in those emotions and that hurt from past experiences I've experienced that have wounded my inner child, and now I'm living in it. I'm back in it. So bringing the presence to it, being honest with yourself, which can be really, really, really challenging when you're not used to it. So being And it can be confronting and it can be vulnerable. And some people would say that it's weak, but it's not. It's the opposite of weak. It's strength. So bringing presence to it, being present, then being honest with yourself, and then possibly honest with the relationships or the people externally from you so that they can understand. So being honest with yourself and going, well, I was just triggered from that and this really, really hurt me and it really, really upset me and I'm really, really sensitive about it. Why? Oh, okay, let's unpack it further. And then ownership, which I've already just kind of like tied in. So owning that, oh my God, I'm really reactive right now. I just like threw my toys out of the cot and that all triggered me, and then I blamed and I attacked someone else. So owning that and being like, I just noticed, and obviously being honest, but speaking outwardly, especially in your relationships and your friendships external from you and your own relationship with yourself, but being in ownership and going, okay, I've just noticed how I just reacted because of X, Y, and Z, and now I understand. But it was really hard for me to control. It wasn't really coming from me, my true self. It was coming from my wound, from my wounded space, if that makes sense. So big, man. So big. Just need some water. So presence, honesty, and ownership. Tool number 1. Which is so big. If this is landing for you on the replay or on the live, or you have any questions, just pop it into the comments as well. I want to say when we do step into presence, honesty, and ownership around something like an abandonment wound too, it's like we incrementally start to heal, but it needs to be with consistency. So every time we go back to that abandonment wound and then we are present, we are honest with ourselves and we own it, we then kind of like upgrade each time. And we may still be reactive. We may still be blameful. We may still have our wall up or shut off, or we may just push it all away and avoid. But each time we consistently do it and then go to consistently be present, honest, and own it each time, consistently each time we are triggered and we open that abandonment wound over and over and over again, and we are present and honest and own it, we upgrade each time, we strengthen and we get a little bit better, and then we heal a little bit more and a little bit more, and our responses over time, they become more responsive rather than reactive. We become more calm than attacking. We become more neutral, more understanding, and more communicative and observant over time, if that makes sense, rather than just snapping and then go, oh, and blaming and attacking. And that was something like, if you look at me 6 months ago in my abandonment wound, I would just actually lose it. I would just get angry and I would just attack, like verbally raise my voice, attack, but it was a defense mechanism for me. And now I do still snap, but it takes me, like, it's a lot more subtle and it's a lot more neutral and it's a lot more responsive rather than a reactive. And I'm becoming, each time I strengthen it, each time I go back into my abandonment wound, into that place, space, and emotion where it all created and started. Every time I get better and better and stronger at being responsive rather than reactive, and unpacking it and communicating what I'm going through, being honest with myself, being present and owning that, wow, I just acted from a place of my wounded inner child, from my abandonment. Okay, I own that. I wish I hadn't reacted like that and taken a deep breath, but it was because I was feeling unsafe. It was because I was having fear of rejection. It was because I was having self-worth challenges and I was wondering, am I not enough? Am I not enough? I'm doing the wrong thing. I'm not being the good person. And I didn't have a sense of trust. Didn't have a sense of safety or security. Okay? Don't know why I'm doing this as a live on public, because it's going to make a very beautiful training, or it is a very good training. But hey, we trust, so I'm sharing it with you today. So that is number 1. What else have we got? So number 2, I want to say a burn or purge letter to past experiences, past/current experiences or relationships. So if you don't know what a purge letter or burn letter is, I'll give you a brief little description. If you want to learn more about it, send me a private message. I do have like a little PDF for a burn letter as well. If you would like that, just send me a message saying burn letter or purge letter. So the second tip or tool I would give to work on, I suppose, coping and healing with, probably more coping rather than healing, abandonment wounds, is something that I used this weekend, is writing a purge or burn letter to past or current experiences and relationships and emotions that you have around abandonment. So for example, this weekend I needed to write one because I was reactive in all my emotions. I was feeling really unsafe. I was feeling really sad. I was feeling really, really abandoned. I was in my fucking wound all fucking weekend, really, really upset, really, really in my inner child. Like, I felt like if I closed my eyes and visualized where I was emotionally all this weekend, it was like a little 3, 4 or 5-year-old sitting in knickers, sitting in the corner of a concrete room in the corner, crying alone with no comfort and no food and nothing, just feeling absolutely fucking abandoned. And I was in a space of reactiveness, of blame, of attack on almost every relationship around me, regardless whether someone had ever abandoned me specifically or not. It was like attack on the world this weekend. That's how abandoned I felt. So it was an internal thing of me, not external from me, but I was struggling with it internally of me. So I tried to look externally of me, which I've written a little bit about that here as well. If you can't find it in yourself, we start to look externally for validation, especially in abandonment. And this weekend, I couldn't find it in myself. I sat in it and I had presence and honesty and ownership in it. But I still was like in this triggered inner child of, I was trying to find comfort and safety in myself this weekend, and I didn't feel it. I had the security and safety, but I didn't feel it. I didn't feel secure. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel loved internally. So I started to look externally from me, and I was scrambling externally and I still couldn't find it. So then I started to flip into blame and judgment and expectation on others and all of these things. And then I was about to get reactive through message and like pretty much attack. Attack. Like I was like ready to like be like, fuck you, to the relationships in my life, because I was feeling so unsafe inside. I couldn't find safety and love and trust within me this weekend, within my abandonment wound and my inner child. I couldn't find the safety in me. I didn't know, because I was in the motion of being present and honest and owning it, but also feeling and sitting in my abandonment wound. And then I looked externally and I asked for the support and the help and the security and the trust, and I didn't get it. I couldn't get it externally from me. So then I was like, okay, I've tried all the fucking things. I can't find safety. I don't know where the love is. I don't feel safety or trust anywhere around me. So then I flipped into protection mode of, fuck, I'm just going to attack. Like my reactive wound came out and went to attack. So this is where this tool is coming into the explanation of what I've just shared, is a purge burn letter to past or present experiences or relationships. So then in this circumstance, in this experience this weekend, I just wrote it on my phone because I was going to otherwise attack the relationships that weren't externally giving me the safety that I wasn't able to give myself this weekend. So I would recommend, if you can, do it on paper and pen, because then you can burn it and it's really satisfying. You're releasing it and you're saying goodbye to it, in a sense, but you're also getting to express all the thoughts and feelings and emotions that are valid, like the valid victim in us, if that makes sense. If you know what I mean by victim mentality or victim state, I slipped into that. My inner child slipped into that this weekend, and it's not a shaming and it's not a negative. It's just a fact. I did a valid victim. Like I had slipped into this victim space this weekend that I was like, no one loves me, no one cares about me, blah, blah, blah. And at the same time, you're like, well, what the fuck, Minnie? You have so many people that care about you. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But that's where it comes in, that this is true abandonment wound. This is inner child wound. That if we do not heal through it, feel and heal through it, be real, feel, and then heal through it, it will always keep coming back up. Doesn't mean that physically I know that I'm loved, and I have many people that I'm so appreciative that I know that love me, but my inner child is still trying to heal and understand all this abandonment and to feel heard and valid for how she felt and the different experiences in her past that she's felt abandonment, not enough, wrong in the way, excluded, and all of those things. So the power of the second tip of how to, I suppose this is more of a coping strategy for supporting yourself through being in your abandonment wound rather than healing it, is to feel heard. I purged out everything I wanted to say, everything to feel heard. So this is a little bit of abandonment wound and a little bit of like almost like throat chakra, like that I felt choked in the past, to not be able to express myself in the way that I want to, or that I've been shushed, which so I done an inner child meditation the other day and I wanted to share this with you guys. This is my drawing at the end. I actually posted it and shared it. And this, so in the meditation, we go in and we walk like down a pathway, etc., to a door. This is my fucking door. This is my door here, and this is the big black fucking hole, and this little love heart here is me, and that's my door that I can't get to through my inner child. This is the deep, dark bullshit that I can't. And then for some reason, I don't even understand the deeper reason of this, but all I was getting was shh. But we always tell our children to shush, don't we? Well, not always, but a lot. Like you see in society that we tell our children to shh, shh. We're listening now, shh. So we're shushing them. We don't mean to, and it's not a blame thing. We're just trying to teach them certain things or get our own stuff done. And I think this is where, from my inner child meditation coming out, this is me, the little love heart down here, trying to get to my fucking door. Into my magicness. This is all the darkness, and all I was getting was shh. That was I told to shush so much when I was a child, that then it also contributed to my abandonment word more. And it's like, that's why the lips are here like shh, shh. That's all I could get was like shh, shut up, you're being noisy all the time. And again, not a judgment thing, not a blame thing. We're all human and we're trying to juggle all the things. It's more of that. It's a fact of life and experience, life exposure of being a human, and that none of us are perfect. We just do what we can do to manage through that time. And sometimes we do need to tell our little people, please, can you be quiet? I need you to be quiet right now because I'm focusing on driving, or something like that. So it's not a blame thing. It's just a fact that these are the little contributions that can contribute to even, well, for me personally, my abandonment wound. So there's all sorts of different ways. There's so many different layers of, it's not just an abandonment wound. There's like, so for me, I feel a lot in my healing at the moment. I feel really choked. Yesterday I done a wound healing process specifically on abandonment, like a full-on oil pastel thing. And I literally, when we stepped into the wound, I was like physically, so spiritually, I was energy clearing through this wound healing process that my beautiful mentor has taught me and walked me through. But I freaking stepped into the wound and literally I was choking physically. Like I could fucking feel it. Like trying to fucking let me speak. And like, oh, it's just unpacking. So back to center, all good stuff, sharing, but back to center. Second tool, purge letter or burn letter to past or current experiences and relationships. So I blurbed all down on my phone everything I wanted to say to that person that I felt abandoned by, because I know it did have a validation to that relationship, but it also was all my abandonment wounds of all my experiences and all my times of not feeling good enough and feeling shushed and feeling unprioritized and excluded, etc. So I felt like I had a voice when I could really expel that, and then now I've deleted it. I didn't need to send it to anyone, and don't send it to anyone, but it still allows you to have an expression. And then I take that back, saying don't send it to anyone. So if you have a mentor or a healer or someone that you have a safe space that you can write a purge letter and then share and have a voice in a safe space that you have permission to share it, a really awesome space and thing to do. Otherwise, writing down and purging exactly how you feel, all that valid victim that we've just been talking about, writing it down, writing that, oh, I hate this, that that I'm frustrated at this, and all these times I felt declined and I felt rejected and I felt alone and I felt abandoned or I felt not enough for you, etc., etc. And then writing it out and then burning it in a safe place in a little metal container or something, obviously doing it safely, but burning the letter away or ripping it up. I ripped one up yesterday. I'm really ripping it up because you're like, so that's out of me. Now I feel heard and it feels valid. Like my emotions feel valid. So big, man. Okay. 3 more little tips and tricks to support us in our journey to healing our abandonment wounds. So the next one, number 3, consistency and building consciousness and awareness. So this one I just kind of chucked in just because, so it's not specific to, I suppose, specifically abandonment wounds. It could be, but it could also relate to other things. So consistency and building consciousness and awareness. So if we are unaware that we even have an abandonment wound and we are not conscious of how our emotions are reacting and how we are feeling internally, we are going to struggle to understand, and we're not going to even be on that healing path or journey. Some people aren't ready or aren't conscious and aren't there. Some people aren't meant to be or just don't, and that's okay. But if you are here listening to this, you obviously, if you're this far into the training and the lesson, you obviously want to heal something and you're listening for a reason. And it's like consistency and building consciousness and awareness to yourself can help us to just understand and bring awareness. Is kind of tied to that first one, presence, honesty, and ownership. But the more that we can just come conscious and aware of knowing, oh, what's going on for me? Oh, I feel really unhappy. Oh, I am very reactive in that space. Why? Oh, because actually under that reactiveness, I'm actually really hurt, or I'm really alone, or I'm in pain, or I'm scared, and whatever the thing is. So consistency and building consciousness and awareness. So you could dip into so many different things. It could just be bringing awareness every day to your emotions. It could be at the end of the day writing down what emotions you felt and had come up for you during the day. It could be starting a daily journal practice. It could be starting a daily or weekly meditation practice, just meditating for 5 minutes a day. It could be getting into nature 2 times a week. So bringing consciousness and practices and awareness to ourselves in our daily life can definitely help us with our abandonment wound and with life in general, and our healing and our emotions, our soul, our health in general. Then number 4, inner child meditation. So I've talked a little bit about it today. I am on day 4 of doing a 14-day stint. I'm hoping to probably do more because I want to get to the bottom of my abandonment wound and I suppose unpack it even more than I already have, and heal it more. So regular inner child meditation. I think I have three main inner child meditations that I do. So if you would like an inner child meditation, just comment inner child in the comments and I can private message you the inner child meditations that I use that work for me. There's so many out there, you can even just YouTube them, and I would really recommend after you do them, drawing or writing, whatever comes out and feels out. No limitations, no judgment on what comes out, just drawing. And sometimes you may not even understand it. So when I was drawing this, I didn't actually understand what I was drawing. I just drew, and then afterwards I looked at it, I was like, what does this mean? And then I was like, oh, okay. This makes sense. So just trusting and putting words or colours and pictures on paper after your inner child meditation. So doing like an inner child meditation cleanse, or I don't know if you call it a cleanse, like a little challenge to yourself to do a certain amount of days consistently in a child meditation, and they don't have to be that long. My main one I use is my beautiful mentor Hannah, and I think her inner child one is about 7 minutes, so you can manage that in one day. Come on, you probably scroll for 3 lots of 7 minutes a day on Facebook, so you can have 7 minutes to do one meditation. And then number 5, books and videos and things around understanding abandonment and attachment and things like that. I have one recommendation, Facing Love Addiction by Pia Melody. I'm about to start reading it again, and I've only just finished it about a month ago, but it changed my perception on so much, and it was really good to have that book as a resource to read that was external from me, no one telling me a perception from my view or my partners or my family or my friends or my relationships, and it wasn't just someone's opinion on my situation or my relationships or my abandonment or my attachment and my addiction. It shed light on attachment in a different way for me, and has helped me absolutely immensely. And there's journaling bits and stuff in that book as well, which are absolutely freaking incredible. Absolutely incredible. So we've got presence, honesty and ownership. Then we've got a purge or burn letter to past or present experiences and relationships, consistency in building consciousness and awareness, inner child meditation practice, and then finding resources just to explore and learn more about abandonment, addiction, attachment, etc. Facing Love Addiction book is my favourite recommendation. Okay, well, I hope that has supported you guys and helped you today in some way or form around abandonment wounds and attachment. It definitely has helped me. If you are keen to get on board, I have 2 spots at the moment to work with me one-on-one. So feel free to send me a private message if you would like some more details. Love you all immensely and have a beautiful, beautiful Monday.